Alright, so this is our second lesson video on chapter 17. So we're going to cover a few more slides, probably about 7 more. So we ended on our last video we talked about coal, we talked about oil, and we were kind of ending on natural gas, so we're going to pick up on natural gas again. So what do we use natural gas for? Well, we use it to generate electricity. We use it for transportation, like fuel for cars, trucks, and buses. It has environmental advantages over gasoline and diesel. Like, for example, it has 33% less carbon dioxide, 80 to 93% fewer hydrocarbons, 70% less carbon monoxide. Remember the difference, carbon dioxide has 2 oxygens, carbon monoxide has 1, and 90% fewer toxic emissions and almost no soot. So it's also used in commercial cooling and plastic and fertilizer production. So we use natural gas a lot, and out of the fossil fuels, natural gas, oil, and coal, natural gas is the cleanest. Now, it still does have pollution, but it's cleaner than coal or oil. So there are disadvantages, and that is that deposits are located far from where the gas is needed. So if the natural gas deposit is deep in a forest, then we have to travel with it long distances to get it to where we need it. Costs 4 times more to transport through pipelines than crude oil. So again, a gas is hard to contain, unlike a solid or a liquid, because it's just going to go into the atmosphere. So it costs a lot more to contain it because it has to be compressed and liquefied and then carried specifically to where it needs to go. And when you compress and liquefy it, also needs to be cool, so you have to have refrigerated containers, and so it gets really expensive. So reserves are found on every continent that have an uneven distribution, kind of like our food that we talked about in chapter 11. We have a lot of food, but it's not spread evenly. So same thing, we got a lot of natural gas, but it's not spread evenly. Hydraulic fracturing, also known as fracking techniques, have changed estimates of natural gas resources. So environmental impacts of fracking are different than other extraction methods. So you probably heard about this in the news a few years ago. It got really big when they talked about that fracking. So back to oil. CO2 production contributes to global warming. So oil produces a lot of CO2. It also produces air pollution that will lead to acid deposition or acid rain. It produces emissions that will make that photochemical smog that we talked about. Remember, that is the reaction of air pollutants with sunlight, so it's worse in the summer. And nitrogen oxides, but almost no sulfur oxides. See, coal releases both. Oil at least only releases 1. So that's why oil is a little better than coal, but natural gas is the best out of these. Alright, so natural gas is relatively clean. It has no sulfur, releases far less CO2 and hydrocarbons, almost no particulate matter compared to oil and coal. The risks associated, of course, are with that transporting a gas, and so there's lots of leaks and spills that can occur because it's a gas. So there's been some major oil spills over the years. Deepwater Horizon drilling platform explosion in 2010 happened in the Gulf of Mexico. It actually killed 11 workers. 4 million barrels of oil spilled from the damaged ocean floor well. So 4 million barrels of oil in the ocean, and that's detrimental to ocean life. Fisheries were disrupted, wildlife was killed, extensive ecological damage occurred. All right, and this is just showing some different amounts of oil spilled in different years since 1910. But oil spills are detrimental to the environment. All right, so we have coal, we have oil, we have natural gas. Coal is the most polluting, oil is a little better, natural gas is the cleanest of those. Our 4th non-renewable resource is nuclear energy. The reason it's not renewable is we have to use uranium, which we mine, and we can't recreate that. So it's eventually going to run out, kind of like our other fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. Once they're gone, and we don't have them anymore. That's why they're called non-renewable. So atoms are composed of protons, which are positive, neutrons, which are neutral, and electrons, which are negative. Protons and neutrons are in the nucleus, and electrons orbit the nucleus. So you have your protons and neutrons in the nucleus, and the electrons are in what we call the electron cloud. So with fossil fuels, combustion releases energy from changes in the chemical bonds between atoms. So when we burn fossil fuels, atoms which are bonded move into different bonding formations. That's probably the easiest way I can describe it right now. And so when bonds are broken and new bonds are formed, energy is released, and we can use that energy to make electricity, heat, things like that. Nuclear energy does not come from bonds. It comes from a change within the nucleus. So in other words, you have 2 options. You can make a nucleus bigger, or you can make a nucleus smaller. And so when you change the size of a nucleus in an atom, a lot of energy is released. And we like that energy because we can use it for electricity, heating, things like that. So nuclear energy is the energy released by fission or fusion nuclear reactions. So there's two types of nuclear reactions we'll talk about, fission and fusion. So fission is the splitting of a nucleus into two smaller fragments. So if this is my nucleus, and I can break it apart into two smaller nuclei, that's an example of fission. So fission is splitting. And it's accompanied by the release of large amounts of energy. So for example, a neutron crashes into the nucleus of uranium. And this is what we use in power plants. So if I have a big uranium nucleus, and then a little neutron comes and hits it, it'll split it apart. And then once that nucleus splits, energy is released, and we can use that energy in a power plant. Fusion is the other type, so it's the opposite. So fission, we have a big nucleus and it splits up. In fusion, we have two or more smaller nuclei and we put them together to make one bigger one. So it's two smaller atoms are combined to form a large atom of a different element. This is the process that powers the sun and other stars. So if you've ever wondered, like, what exactly is going on in the sun? How is this giant ball of nuclear fire happening? This is what's happening. Tons of small atoms are fusing together. So if you'll remember, fusion is fusing, two things coming together. And so again, a lot of energy is released, and in the stars and the sun, it is, of course, in the form of fire. So that's why they're burning at all times. So here's just a picture of what's kind of happening in the fission process. So we have this large uranium nucleus. A neutron kind of bumps into it, and so then if you look, it's now split. And so when it splits, it releases a lot of energy. And so that's what's happening when we talk about nuclear energy, is a large nucleus splitting into multiple smaller nuclei. All right, so we'll stop there, and I'll make my last lesson video, and then you can finish up your packet then.